Have you ever left in the middle of a date? If so, why? I told her I was colorblind. She recoiled and said it was gross and sat there looking at me like I had the plague or something. I just sort of got up and left. It was really odd. Edit. I don't think she was racist. It was more of a EWW. A cripple kind of disgust. I think. I don't really know. We were already dating. But I thought it would be nice to take her for a meal one evening. She walked in. Followed by her sister. Then her best friend. And their respective boyfriends. All of whom had no money. She got upset when I said I didn't have enough money to feed 6 when a meal for 2 would have set me back a cute 40 or more. So I left. She sent me a text on my way home saying we were over. I didn't bother replying. To this day I have no idea why she thought it was socially acceptable to bring 4 more people to our date without telling me first. She didn't think it was okay. Met girl online. She shows up for our first date drunk. With her drunk friend. And 1-month-old son that she had forgot to mention. Baby was sober I think. I excused myself to the restroom and ran like my ass was on fire. She started talking about our wedding and our future kids on our first date. She wasn't joking around. And when I told her that it was way too sudden to be talking about that, she looked at me quizzically and said, "Don't you want to get married?" First online date I'd ever gone on. Plenty of awkward ones after that, including the girl who got drunk then admitted she had an infant son and lived with her ex-husband. But that one took the cake. He brought another girl with him. Guy from OkCupid a few years back. Takes me to a 5-star restaurant. I try to stick to the middle of the road drinks food as it's a first date. Dinner went really well so we decide to go for post-dinner drinks. I get to the point where I feel I should stop drinking since it's a first date and I wasn't really ready for him to see me trashed. He orders me another drink and then invites me over to his house because his wife is out of town. Date over. We met online. She brought her sister on our first date. She never spoke and all her sister did was drill me about my plans and my intentions. After ordering she said, "I hope you're planning on paying." That's what a real man would do on a first date. So I said true, but this wasn't a date. It was a job interview. I dropped my half in cash and walked out. BTW I drove us there. Never heard from them again. He was 45 minutes late. Got mad that another guy had started chatting me up at the bar while I waited. Then proceeded to tell me about the hidden satanic messages in the opening ceremony of the Olympics. Yes. Went to get coffee to test the waters with someone new. First thing he did was ask me to turn around and lift my shirt so he can see my ass. I got up, turned around and walked out the door. I left in the middle of a movie once. The date was going great but I forgot that I had left a pot pie in the oven in my apartment. Only broke college guys and old people eat pot pies. I remembered a few minutes and whispered something along the lines of "Gotta get my pot pie out of the oven so I don't burn down my apartment, I'll be right back." I did return but she was pissed. Thought we could go see the pot pie and have a laugh. Arrived at my previously empty apartment to find my brother and the neighbor girls drunk and naked in my living room. Showed her the pot pie and she said something along the lines of "You're an asshole, take me home." That's just hilarious. I would have stayed around for a second date to at least see what else happened. He scraped the bottom of his low to the ground car on my driveway. He took it, and me, straight to a mechanic to look at the damage. He told me that if it was a quick fix he would only make me pay half. I said my brother is a mechanic, let me go call him. Left and called for a ride. Fuck that. She brought up politics and religion. Attacked my stance on both, then pestered me about my financial stability all before they brought out the bread. How was the bread? This was a third date. He was a nice enough guy. An editor at the local newspaper. We're at his house and he's made me dinner and suddenly he drops a normal conversation that his fetish is having sex with girls that are unconscious. I immediately stopped eating. Stopped drinking. and made my exit. I did not get roofied, but damn was I scared that it was in the cards for that night. Edit. His exact words were "you're so SY. I'd love to share something with you since we seem to be hitting it off. Yada yada yada." I excused myself to the bathroom and pretended to get an emergency call. He got arrested 2 years later for being a peeping Tom. Then moved away. I swear this happened. I met some real weirdos when I was doing the OkCupid thing. For instance, met a guy that said a black panther was his spirit animal and that she came to him in his dreams. Sometimes she told him to do bad things to people, but she was okay with me. That one never got a second date. But I saw his engagement notice in the paper a year later. She would not stop talking about babies. Her friends had them. Her sisters had them. Her brothers had them and made sure it was perfectly crystal clear. She did not have one. Yikes. Met a guy online who lived about an hour away. We agreed to meet up closer to me and he told me he was just going to stay in town that night. I figured he had friends here or whatever. He gets to the date and he is clearly about 15 years older than his pictures represented. I figured I would finish the meal then ktfo. After dinner he insisted on walking me to my car and then said, "Okay. So I'll just follow you back to your place then?" I was quite shocked and a little scared for my safety, so I said okay and then ripped out of that parking lot before he could get to his car. He texted me an hour later and told me he was home lol. Never heard from him after that. So wait. He just assumed he would be staying at your place? She started doing blow halfway through. Did she at least offer you a line? Had been on a couple of dates with this guy. At his place. Watching a movie. He climbs on top of me. I tell him I'm not comfortable. He does it again. Adding, "I like shy girls." Date over. He sounds very rappy. You're pretty smart. It was an OkCupid date and we met for coffee after talking a while. He had a sour look on his face when I got there. So I wasn't expecting too much. When our coffee came out, he said, "I'm glad you didn't ask me to pay for that. Because I don't think you should be drinking something with that many calories. I'm a fat person." But he was way fatter than me. So I thought he was being self-deprecating. I was prepared to roll my eyes and let it go. But then he ranted for about 15 minutes about how women were getting too fat and how they should be pressured to lose more weight. Eventually I stopped him with the "you saw my picture. Why did you even agree to coffee?" His answer was, "I was hoping you had lost weight since the picture was taken. Because no one would put themselves on a dating app in that condition." Picked up a girl for a first date. On the drive to eat she's tapping away on her phone a few times. Get to the place to eat. Sits down. Tapping away texting. A few minutes later. Texting again. I excuse myself to use the bathroom. And leave. Seriously. Who taps nowadays? It was the second date. He was complaining because I wasn't wearing a low cut top. So FCK him. I'm happily married but these threads make me think that I'd be a champion at dating. How'd it go? Well. He has a job and looked at my face for at least 80% of the night. So it was fantastic. Till I'm not such a bad guy and a decent first date. I met a guy on Grindr. Turns out his profile picture was 10 years out of date. And he was about 100 pounds heavier. But I decided to give it a chance anyways. Because I didn't want to be rude. His first question was if I liked to drive my car barefoot. Then he complained that his dinner smelled like S. I left immediately. Then he complained that his dinner smelled like S. This made me cry real tears of laughter. Smelled like S. Everyone in the library hates me now because I can't stop laughing at this. Who the FCK says that to another person they just met? This didn't happen to me, but a stoner buddy of mine left during the middle of a date because he was high and forgot he was on one. They had smoked up before drinks at his local pub and she went to use the washroom. Was in a little too long and he just plumb forgot he wasn't there alone and went home. This was before cell phones were super common. FCK, I am old, so there was nowhere the FCK you text. I have done it once. We arranged to meet at a bookstore because that is where I am most comfortable meeting people. When he arrived he looked nothing like his photo and stood way too close. So close that I couldn't even think of a situation where standing that close to someone is ever acceptable. I decide to walk around and hopefully my walking around would put some distance, but nope. Somehow this guy was able to stay glued to me the entire time. Every question I asked was replied with an I don't know. Finally, I said I was feeling really uncomfortable and was going to go home. I turned to leave and I feel his hand go from my shoulder down my back to my hip. It made me cringe so bad. I noped out fast. She had come to my dorm room drunk 2 times before to sleep it off. Nothing happened. And wanted to go on a date for Chinese food. She couldn't stop talking about country music. How was I she thought trucks were. I did not have a car. How stupid she thought nerds were. I was a CSCI major. And how she was still in love with her previous boyfriend. I pretended to have an emergency and left about halfway through. And didn't talk to her again. Dude came to meet for a beer completely stoned out of his mind and incapable of any conversation. He made really random observations about the bar and then said that he only had harvested enough for 1 beer. I paid and bailed. I told him there was emergency at home. When he started talking about his RP fantasies. WTF. Not a date. But I left dinner with my brother and his crazy girlfriend of the month. This one won't stop telling us about how she had recently conquered a dream shark that was giving her nightmares. It was a metaphor for her life or something. I told them my cat was sick after she showed us a picture she drew of the shark. I really did try. But after 30 minutes being lectured on a dream shark, I lost it. This was 2001. Met a girl cycling in the mornings and every morning we seemed to have the same schedule. We chat while we rode. She was funny and had a killer body so I asked her out. We meet up for lunch talking for the first time not on our bikes. Not 5 minutes into it 9/11 comes up. She said the following. God didn't protect us because of the gays in NY. Islam should be illegal in the US. She saw no problem killing Muslims and or gays. Non-Christians shouldn't be allowed to vote. Bonus. She almost didn't come to the date because there are so many blacks in the city. Note. This was not a discussion. It really came out almost bullet pointed. I'm just sitting there going aha. 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 She goes from one topic to another. I straight up just said. You are truly a horrible person. And went on my merry way. Stuck her with the bill. Edit. 9/11 didn't happen during the date. She brought the topic up a couple times. The most memorable was when the guy put his hand on my thigh and whispered, just so you know for later. I'm HIV positive. Edit. To put this in context. It was my first time meeting this guy and the date wasn't going particularly well to begin with. It was equal parts presumptuous and creepiness that was off-putting. I think that under the right circumstances, that's okay. Maybe not as creepily as that. But it's good to be open about STDs if something were to actually happen. He bit me. He kept glaring at the bartender who was smiling at me while pouring my glass of wine. When I asked the bartender for a recommendation, the guy was not happy that the dude and I were talking. I went into the bathroom and had my friend call me in 5 minutes to pretend to be my roommate locked out of our apartment. Keep in mind that this was the first time we've met face to face and first date. Edit. Know everyone. The 2 men were not plotting to roofie me. The bartender was smiling at me being polite and could tell that the date was not going anywhere since all the dude could talk about was how life-changing a trip he went on 3 years previous was. Met a woman on OkCupid. And after chatting back and forth for a few weeks we decide to meet for coffee at a local Starbucks. When she shows up she's much heavier and older than her pictures. And looking like she's coming off a 2-week meth bender. I decide to play it out. To see what happens. Conversation was pretty dull till she started talking about her job and how much she hates it. Mainly because her bosses don't pay her a lot because, I quote, the Jews. I immediately excuse myself to the bathroom and call a friend for the classic call in 5 minutes with an emergency. No response. Time to man mode it. I go back to the table. State I have to leave. Grab my coat. Say it was wonderful to meet her. And bolt. Thankfully never heard from her again. I was 19 and accepted a date with an older guy. I thought he was probably 27 or so. But it turns out he's 37. The club where we met danced he got my number was sort of dark. Close bracket. We go to dinner. And he starts reminiscing about going parking and making out back in the day and would I like to go for a drive later? Something I ate gave me a stomachache. Sadly, I had to go home early. In a taxi. Yes. I drove to the dude's house for our first date and he immediately shows me all the weed he is growing around the house and wants me to smoke. Now, I enjoy smoking. But I knew I had to drive home on country roads through the dark. It was our first date. I just didn't want to smoke. Dude flips out on me, asks me what is wrong with me. Proceeds to call me a bunch of awful names like SLT, etc. I grab my purse. Walk out the door. Cried the entire way home. I've never been out with a black guy before. You're not what I expected at all. This is really nice. I proceeded to pay for my coke and left. He drove a half hour to meet me. So I almost felt bad. Almost. You should have spit out your drink. And exclaimed what? I'm black. In trying to make a point about why feminism is awful during a first date. He asked me if I'd rather be arped or sent to prison for 20 years. Not exactly sure what he was trying to explain there. But I left instead of answering. Claimed she was 5 feet 4 110 pounds. Turns out 5 feet 4 110 pounds girls were her main diet. I don't hate fat people. Although I wouldn't go out with one because I'm a twig. But don't f***ing lie to me, you land whale. She kept using the word infer when she obviously meant imply. I know some guys would put up with that kind of thing. But frankly, I can't imagine why. Had to poop. I didn't realize I was on a date. My co-worker mentioned we should grab dinner while finishing up a project we were working on. Which seemed like a good idea. Because it was after work. And I was hungry. While I was reading over his draft, he asked me how serious are things with you and your fiancé? Well, we've set a date. And I have a dress fitting coming up. So pretty f***ing serious. Went to a nice but not formal place for our third date. I still wasn't sure if I was into her yet. But the previous dates went well enough and she was HAWT. I guess she was a little more comfortable this time and so she ordered the surf and turf with a top shelf martini. I was a little shocked and embarrassed because my budget only allowed so much. I ended up with a salad and a water. Okay. So still not a deal breaker but it's obvious she's using me a little. Halfway through the meal she starts making fun of people I know and like. Some of the jokes were funny and not too far off base. But I cut her off dead in her tracks when she started talking shitty about my twin brother. Nada. I told the waiter to bring me my half of the check and then I walked out without saying a word. You do not talk shitty about my family. Especially my brother. She kept on texting other people most of the time and was even apologizing about doing. Yet still kept on texting on her phone the whole time. At one point she was deep in her phone so I put down a few bucks for my drink and left. I keep reading each successive post like I am hoping the next one will be an actual happy story about how a date went unexpectedly awesome. All the while forgetting what thread I am in. Went on a date back in the MySpace days with a friend of a friend that I started talking to via MySpace. In her pictures she was gorgeous but it was before the days where most guys were aware of the angles and lighting tricks ladies. Yes, guys do it too. Used to look flattering in pictures. Every picture on her profile was just full of breasts and nice hair and makeup and looking amazing. Anyways, we plan to meet up at a movie theater to catch a show and she comes walking up outside and she is a f***ing custard cow. This chick was at least 250 pounds and she was disgusting. Caked on makeup. Super push-up padded bra that was way too tight. Just oozing everywhere. I played nice and polite and as we were walking in I said I needed to grab my wallet that I forgot out of my car. Nope, the FCK out when I got to my car. TL.